All right, welcome back to the final lesson of Chapter 3, American Imperialism. Today we are going to talk about the intervention in Mexico and how Mexico and the United States had abrasions during this time period. So first and foremost, as Woodrow Wilson gets elected in 1912, he has a whole different foreign policy called moral responsibility, in that the United States had a responsibility to spread the good of what our country represented, things like civil liberties and democratic processes and elections and the like, all of the basic ideas of what makes America today. And as we're going to talk about Mexico, this is really going to put Wilson in a bind, because he is going to have to take his moral responsibility in foreign relations and apply it to a neighboring country. So first and foremost, we're going to talk about Porfirio Diaz. He was the dictator of Mexico for 33 years. He was not a terrible leader, not a great leader. I mean, obviously he led for 30 years, so there's something there. But he was corrupt, as dictators go. So he was taking all these nations' requests and asked nations like the United States to come in and to help develop their infrastructure in Mexico, especially with the mines. He wanted mines to be updated in modern engineering and just help with the overall process so they could produce more, and therefore they could compete on the international market. So Mexico got this influx of money from all these nations that wanted to help out, and then of course they're going to prosper off of the success of Mexico. But the people, it never seemed to trickle down to the people. All these millions of dollars are pouring in from these foreign nations were actually lining Diaz's pockets. He was becoming extremely wealthy. His bureaucrats around him were becoming extremely wealthy, and the people were not. So in 1911, there is a workers' rebellion. Francisco Madero leads the working class. He says that the dictatorship under Diaz is corrupt, and the working class needs to rise up, and we're being oppressed, and all of the pro-worker jargon that is always thrown out with revolutions of this kind. He leads them, and after overthrowing Diaz, of course, in violent revolutions, typically the previous leaders executed, and Madero is going to come in and make all of these promises. I will work for you. I will do all these things for you. But he doesn't. Just like many other dictators in world history, just like the Adolf Hitlers, just like the Benito Mussolinis, the Joseph Stalins, all these promises were made that got the bulk of the countrymen to side with him, but he didn't follow through. So 2 years later, as people are fed up, there's going to be a military coup. Victoriano Huerta is going to lead the military in. He is going to sweep through the Huerta government, and he's going to publicly execute Huerta. This is a military-style revolution, so it's bloody. And when Huerta takes over, he is going to rule with an iron fist. He's going to be the sole dictator. Everything's going to run through him. And so we have gone from Diaz, who wasn't great, to Madero, who was worse, to now the worst of the group, Huerta. And when Huerta comes in, Wilson was elected in 1912, and Huerta comes in and wipes the Madero regime off of the board in 1913, so a year after Wilson's elected. So his moral responsibility, his foreign policy, there's going to kick in, and he's going to say, I will not recognize Huerta's government. That's going to cause a lot of tension between Mexico and the United States. But there's been no overt action. There's been nothing directly against the United States here, so Wilson can't get involved. We can't use our military just because of the standards by which we apply our government. And so he's going to adopt this period of what he calls watchful waiting. He is going to watch Mexico like a hawk. He's going to take every action they do under a microscope, and he's going to wait for his opportunity here. And in 1914, the Tampico incident is the incident that he needs. So as the story goes, there was American sailors from an American naval ship that were in Veracruz, and they were arrested. Presumably, they were given shore leave and went and caused a ruckus, got into a fight. I'm not sure exactly the details there, but they were arrested. The Mexican officials refused to release them to the commanding officer, which would be common practice for the day. The commanding officer radios back to Washington saying that we have a slight international incident here between our sailors and the Mexican officials. And Wilson says, this is my chance. Go ahead and seize Veracruz. We're going to make an example out of Mexico. And so there's a firefight. There's bombarding from our naval vessels into Veracruz, but it's not much of a fight. We take Veracruz, we lock it down. And before a war can break out, many other nations in the region, your Argentinas, your Brazil, your Chile, they're going to step in and say, let's mediate this before this breaks out into an all-out war, because a war in the Latin America and North America is going to destabilize the trade in the entire area, and that's not good for anybody. And so they sit down, and at the mediating table, both sides are going to get something, while both sides are also going to give up something. That is the nature of compromise. And so the U.S. is going to demand that Huerta steps down, that he brutally killed his predecessor, and that they hold a democratic election to elect a new leader that represents the Mexicans. Mexico is going to refuse. And the long and the short of this process is America's going to have to pay for damages done to Veracruz, and Huerta will be forced to step down. In 1915, there's going to be a presidential election. Venustiano Carranza is going to be elected. He's a democratically elected president. He is giving rights to the people. So here Wilson comes back in and reverses pace from the Huerta regime. And he says, because you are embodying the ideals that we cherish, I am going to recognize your government. Once again, you are a recognized government. We'll trade with you. We'll conduct diplomacy with you. We'll allow our citizens to travel to Mexico, etc. You are a recognized country. While Carranza is the leader, doesn't mean that people from the previous regimes are still not following the ideas of the previous regime. So you have Huerta, you have Diaz, and you have Madero, these three regimes that have existed in the past 4 years. So Pancho Villa and Zapata are going to be followers of the Huerta regime. They did very well under Huerta, and they're going to be rebelling against Carranza. They don't believe that this is just. They're going to live kind of like the wild, wild west. They're going to live out in the middle of nowhere. They're going to raid towns and villages. They are just rebels, and it's really hard to put their finger, Mexico, for them to put their finger on them, because there are still loyalists to Huerta and Madero within the Carranza government and the Carranza military. And so there's a lot of trouble that Carranza has to deal with. So Carranza is going to go back to what Diaz had proposed and ask Americans and other nations to invest in Mexico. And Americans do. We send engineers, we send down workers, and Pancho Villa is going to stop the train, and he is going to pull all of the Americans deliberately off and execute them right then and there on the side of the railroad tracks. This is very disturbing. However, now you have a three-party debate that's going to go on. Wilson's going to accuse Mexico of not stopping the Pancho Villa and the rebels, while Carranza says, I condemn them. I don't agree with them. I don't want this to go on, but we can't find him. And then, of course, you're going to have Pancho Villa and Zapata that are the rebels that are kind of in the middle, aside from the two other nations. So there's been no overt action against the United States, although he did pull Americans off this train. So Wilson and the United States are going to be very angry, but he's going to cross the line a couple months later when he literally crosses the border into the United States. Villa crosses the border into the United States. He's going to raid the town of Columbus, New Mexico, and he's going to kill 17 Americans while he is there. And this is the final straw. Wilson says, is enough. I'm going to send 15,000 soldiers down to the border under the command of Brigadier General John G. Pershing. He is to go into Mexico under my order and kill or capture Villa as a criminal in the United States. So a lot of the army is going to just be stationed on the border to ensure Pancho Villa, Zapata, or any of the rebels don't come back over the border and harass people in the Southwest. Pershing and his army are going to march across northern Mexico and unsuccessfully pursue Pancho Villa. And this is going to anger a lot of the Mexican Americans and say, why are we allowing the American army here? Are they invading us? What are they doing? Carranza, you need to step up and stop them from just invading our country. And Carranza does. He mobilizes the Mexican army, and then there's a standoff in June of 1916 where the Mexican army and the American army are going to clash. Not a whole lot of casualties, but it shows that the relations between the two nations are back to teetering. We've never really solved the issues at hand here, and that Mexico is just tired of the United States and our army being present. So following that, in 1917, Wilson is going to order Pershing and the 15,000 soldiers to return home. America has an ulterior motive for this. It's not just because we want to give up on Pancho Villa, but we got bigger fish to fry. It is revealed that a telegram from Germany to Mexico was uncovered by British agents. And Germany is telling Mexico to declare war on the United States and keep us locked here in North America and keep us out of Europe, because right now World War I has been waging for 3 years in Europe. And with that, that's an overt action. The United States is gearing up to get involved in World War I over in Europe. So Pancho Villa, although very unsuccessful in the attempt to go get him, it did give our military the chance to train and become confident in their abilities prior to going to World War I. And that's going to be the real significance of the whole Pancho Villa chase. And with that, that's the end of our chapter. So make sure you go back and study. Make sure you flip back over the PowerPoints or go back over some of these lectures so that the information is fresh in your heads. As always, the reading's available as well.